Good morning, third graders. Today is Tuesday, May 5th, 2020. We have 3 pages we'll be working on, page 520, page 521, and page 522. So let's get started. On page 520, we'll be working on a little bit of vocabulary. The My Turn reads, add the vocabulary word from the word bank to complete the chart. Then use each newly acquired vocabulary word in a sentence about making a safety plan. So the words in the word bank are prepared, emergency, responsible, and memorize. And memorize has already been used. You can go ahead and cross that word off now so you know that you don't need to use it. A synonym is a word that means the same or nearly the same, and an antonym is a word that means the opposite. So we have to use the synonyms and antonyms as clues to figure out what vocabulary word we need to fill in the chart. And then your sentence needs to be a sentence using the actual vocabulary word, but it needs to be related to making a safety plan. So let's take a look at this sample. The synonym is remember. The antonym is forget. The opposite of forgetting would be to remember something or memorize it. The synonym is remember. So we knew the word is memorize. And the sentence relating to a safety plan states memorize your parents' phone numbers. So your job is to take a look at these synonyms and antonyms and find the missing vocabulary word. So we have crisis and peace. Which word means the same or nearly the same as crisis? Would it be prepared, emergency, or responsible? A crisis is an emergency, so you need to go ahead and write the word emergency down. At the end of this video, or now if you want to pause it, you need to use the word emergency in a sentence. So maybe something like, in case of an emergency, you need to have a safety plan. Okay, let's move on. The synonym is ready and the antonym is unready. We only have 2 words left, prepared and responsible. So which word means the same as ready and is the opposite of unready? If you're thinking prepared, you're right. So go ahead and fill in the word prepared and then think about how you can use the word prepared in a sentence about a safety plan. Maybe having a safety plan will make you feel prepared. All right, we have 1 word left. We know that that word is responsible. It's the only word left, but let's go ahead and look at the synonyms. So if you are in charge, that means you're pretty responsible. If you're excused from something, you're not responsible for it. So go ahead and write the word responsible and use it in a sentence. Maybe your sentence would be having a safety plan is the responsible thing to do. All right, let's move on. On page 521, we have our check for understanding, which is our comprehension questions. Remember, you can always look back at the text to help you answer the questions. And I've also written down a couple page numbers for you to refer to. So if you need help, always go back to the text. Question number 1 says, what characteristics help you identify this as a procedural text? Well, as always, if you've forgotten what the type of genre is, go back to the anchor chart and take a look. But something that really stood out to me about this text is that it includes steps, and those steps are numbered. So those numbered steps help to explain how to perform a task. Go ahead and write something down about that. So this text includes numbered steps that tell me how to perform a task, and that's how I know it's a procedural text. It's teaching me a procedure, telling me how to do something. When you're ready, move on to number 2. What do you think is the author's purpose for including the chart on natural disasters? Okay, remember that chart, you guys? That chart was on page 510. Why would the author include a chart with all these different types of natural disasters? Well, you guys, all of those disasters could potentially lead to emergencies. Write something about that, how the chart on page 510 lists types of natural disasters that could lead to an emergency. Remember, this entire text is about, in case of an emergency, you should have a plan so you will be prepared. All right, let's move on. Question number 3. What text evidence supports the idea that families should create a safety plan together? So when we're talking about text evidence, you actually have to go back in the text and take a piece of it and write it down. So if you went back to page 512 and 513, you'll remember that on those pages you were reading about having a calling plan and a meeting place. Those are two pieces of text evidence that really are trying to support the idea that families should create a safety plan together. So you should have a calling plan and a place for your family to meet. Okay, let's move on. Question number 4. How can preparing for an emergency help keep people safe? Synthesize information from different sections of the text in your response. So what does that mean, to synthesize information from different sections of the text in your response? That means take pieces of information, not just from one part of the text, but maybe from more than one part of the text, those different sections, and kind of put them together to answer this question. For me, this text really talks about how we can keep people safe by preparing for an emergency, because it talks about where to go, what to do, who to call, and it even talks to you about having specific supplies ready so you'll really be prepared for an emergency. All right, I hope that was helpful, you guys. When you're ready, move on to the next page. And we're going to take a look at this chart on page 522. So within this text, we have a couple of different text structures. And we have some text evidence that I'm going to tell you to write down. We'll do this page completely together so you're not hanging, kind of feeling like you're alone in this. But I want you to look at the example. So the text evidence that they chose to use in this example is from paragraph 1. And they actually put something from the text in quotation marks. It means they've copied it exactly from the text and written it down. It reads, if you study for your test, you are likely to get a good grade. If your family makes a grocery list, you'll remember to get everything you need. So what's the text structure of that? That text structure would be cause and effect. If, then. So if you study for your test, then you're likely to get a good grade. If your family makes a grocery list, then you'll remember to get everything you need. And it says, how does the structure contribute to the author's purpose? Well, the author connects the positive effects of planning in everyday life as reasons to create a safety plan. So when you plan in your everyday life, it makes you a little more successful. And so if you want to be successful and prepared and responsible in case of an emergency, you need to have that plan set in place. Okay, so now we're told to find some text evidence from paragraphs 18 and 20. So you're welcome to pause the video and go back in your student interactive and take a look. But when you do go back to paragraphs 18 and 20, something that stands out to me is that the text says important items to include in a safety kit. And then they actually list those important items. So go ahead and write that down or go back to the text to find it and copy it. But it says important items to include in a safety kit. Okay, now what would the text structure of that be? If we go back to paragraphs 18 and 20, let's do that. So you guys can see. And if you have your interactive, you can follow along or get yours out. But it says, what goes in a safety kit? Here are important items to include in a safety kit. So number 1, it talks about food, water, and other related supplies. Number 2, it talks about personal items. Number 3, a first aid kit. And it continues to go on. So what are those numbers for? Those numbers are telling us the sequence or the order of which items in a safety kit are most important. So remember, if you haven't written down your text evidence, you need to put that in quotation marks. Important items to include in a safety kit. Then the text structure. The text structure is sequence. So go ahead and write the word sequence. Well, how does this structure contribute to the author's purpose? How does this help the author? Think about that for a minute. The author wants to explain what items are in a safety kit, and they want you to know which items are more important than the other items. So it helps the author show you what's most important. Okay, you guys, we're gonna go ahead and stop right there. Please reach out to me if you need any more help, and I'd be happy to help you. Have a great afternoon.